Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 7 of Binbogami Ga. Now, as I said last time, this episode introduces my favorite character in the series, and that is, of course, Ron Maru. So, we'll talk about Ichiko and Momiji and what's going on with them character-wise in a little while. Let's talk about Ranmaru. And the first thing about her is that she's got that obviously very strange outfit. Now, I've seen that outfit on basically that same outfit on characters in other anime, and I could be wrong about this, but my understanding of it is basically I think this is how juvenile delinquents tended to be portrayed in manga from the 60s. Now, I could be wrong about that. My knowledge of, except for some of the real major classics of manga, sort of peters out right around the early 1980s. But I am genuinely pretty sure that's what this is all a reference to. And as I said in my earlier reviews, I think that Momiji's school uniform might also be drawing on school uniforms from the 60s. So, again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that that's what's going on here. And I actually get a kind of a kick out of that. In other shows that I've seen this in, like I think it was called Jubei-chan, the Ninja Girl, or something like that. They had a character who was really into that, and I wasn't really feeling him. Here with Ranmaru, I think it works because again, going from Momiji, we're sort of getting a little bit of a retro vibe, and I think in this series that sort of retro thing is really a way to highlight that these characters are unusual or strange, and Ranmaru is indeed a very, very, very strange girl due to her background, but she's really a very enjoyable character, and I just really liked that we have somebody besides Momiji for Ichiko to kind of butt heads with, and this is a role that Ranmaru does really well, and honestly, this series does need to be something more than just Ichiko versus Momiji every episode. If the show couldn't move beyond that, then really this would just be a gigantic Tom and Jerry cartoon every single episode. Now, nothing wrong with Tom and Jerry. Like most people out there, I grew up watching the cartoons as a kid, and I love the characters. But really, that's just not enough to sustain a series like this, which is, of course, why we have Keita and Ranmaru to sort of expand Ichiko's world a little bit, give her some people that she can slowly start to care about, and give it, again, make it more than just her conflict with Momiji. Now, the main interesting thing about Ranmaru is, excuse me a sec. It's really dry in my apartment for some reason today. Is that she's really the first person in the series who we're introduced to who has a parent. And this really, really does seem to get Ichiko's goat a little bit. Now, we've seen earlier in her interactions with Keita that she's willing to admit to herself that it does bother her that she has no family. And the thing is, though, with her interactions with Keita, that was mostly about what it is like to have siblings. With Ranmaru, the main conflict is, apart from their individual conflicts between each other, is dealing with someone who has a parent. Now, it's been really kind of danced around a little bit over the course of the previous episodes that Ichiko's parents are not around. And from the preview, it looks like we're kind of going to get into that a little bit more very soon, which is something that I'm looking forward to because in the manga, and again, I have read all the manga that's been translated by the fans out there, it's really been pretty sparse on exactly what's going on with Ichiko's parents. So I'm thinking that the anime may be taking its own path on this, but that's okay with me. It's certainly fertile ground for good storytelling, and I think if we're really to kind of understand Ichiko better as a character. That's somewhere where we need to go, and I think at this point in this series, we're getting ready to go there. So, sorry. And of course, the thing that really gets Ichiko here is that she basically thinks that Ranmaru's dad is a humongous jerk, and she's not wrong about that. On the other hand, seeing Ranmaru defend him, even though he has done something that is pretty darn wrong, that also drives her crazy, because Ranmaru has a bad parent, or at least a very, to be completely fair, a flawed parent, but she still loves them anyway. Ichiko has really basically only had Suwano for her whole life, and it's very obvious that she loved him a great deal. It really seems that she has nothing but resentment for her parents, and if it really is if things really are as they appear, and that Suwano is the only person she's ever had her whole life, well, then that feeling is pretty understandable. But still, even so, seeing Ranmaru defend her dad, even after he's been such a jerk to her, really does bother Ichiko. It's not something that she can really wrap her head around. She can't seem to understand the idea of loving a parent who is not perfect. Now, granted, she's never really had an example other than Suwano as a parent. Her parents have just been absent in her life. She's never had the chance to have them do anything good for her, so no, of course she's going to feel nothing but resentment for him. But, and this is I think one of the more interesting parts of this episode, is again we see Momiji coming back in, and in her own way, for whatever reason, sort of playing that stealth mentor to Ichiko, and even in an odd way comforting her by telling her, you did what you did for Ranmaru. So she's basically telling Ichiko, things didn't work out the way you wanted, but you still did the right thing, and you should be proud of yourself for that. Which, given the contentious nature of Momiji and Ichiko's relationship, I think that really does say a lot about Momiji's character. Now, I think it's been very obvious from the start of this series that Momiji and Ichiko are probably going to end up as being friends. Vitrolic best buds is the term the good folks at TV Tropes use. And if you're not familiar with the word vitrolic, it basically is just people who, even though they say they hate each other, really are in fact friends. And that's, at this point, well, maybe you wouldn't exactly call Ichiko and Momiji friends, but they've just been through so much weirdness together that it's hard to deny that there is some kind of bond between them. Let's see. Yes, but let's turn back to Ranmaru for a moment. Now, Ranmaru is an example of an element, or basically a trick that people use in storytelling that I really like a lot. And this is what I call the accept rule. Now, for example, in Ranmaru's case, she's tough talking, badass karate chick, but when she's confronted with trying to act like your standard issue girl, or feelings of romance, that hard nature just completely fades. She is, in a way, emotionally crippled in trying to deal with this. And those sort of things, those contrasts, are wonderful, wonderful things for making characters interesting and fun and human. I mean, really, haven't we all had those moments where we're just trying to deal with someone or something remote romantically, and despite what we want to do, we just feel uncertain. We feel, how do I like this person? How do I tell them I feel about them? How do I approach them? What do I even say to this person? I mean, that's someplace we've all been. It's just a part of growing up and becoming an adult. And tapping into that is just simply good storytelling. So yeah, gonna see more of that from Ronmaru as the series goes on, and frankly, I'm looking forward to it because it's just funny and cute, and what can I say? I just get a kick out of that sort of stuff. This is a prime example, I think, of why teenagers in fiction are very common choices for protagonists. When you're a kid, you look up to teenagers because you are going to be in that boat in the near future. So you want to learn from them, to understand what it is they're going through in order to prepare yourself for when that time in your life comes around. When you are a teenager, well, obviously you gravitate towards teenage protagonists because they're going through the same things you are. They're much easier for you to relate to. And even when you become an adult, teenagers are still enjoyable protagonists because you can look back on that point in your life and remember what it is like to go through that. Now, granted, by the time you've become an adult, you do have the benefit of hindsight. Some water's gone under the bridge, so the pains of teenage life are something that you can sort of look back on, maybe not always with fondness, but with the benefit of time heals all wounds. But anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about a few things I noticed in this episode. One, I do enjoy. Okay, let me try and speak clearly. I did really enjoy the line where the teacher comments that the reason they have so many transfer students in their classroom is because there's a main character in the class. I thought that was really just a very clever way of acknowledging something that really is an extraordinarily common cliche in so many manga. So, they just flat out ran with it, and I did get a big kick out of that. Now, in terms of references to other anime, of course, I think the one with everybody adopting the really serious, crazy face, to some of the younger fans out there that they might have been lost on that, but that's a reference to a very classic, much-loved series in Japan called Fist of the North Star. It's actually a series that's got quite a few fans back in the West. Very old school. If you're not familiar with it, it's sort of like if Mad Max was a martial artist. You'd be somewhere along the lines of what Fist of the North Star is, but it's a lot more than that. But I'm not really a big, huge fan of that. It's just something I'm somewhat familiar with, so won't get too much into that. Now, another thing I'd like to point out is, did you notice that during the fight at the school with Ronmaru, that the referee looked an awful lot like Stalker, the narrator from G Gundam, a series which has already been referenced before in this series? And, of course, I'm sure we got, once again, some very obvious references to Dragon Ball. I don't think an episode of this show has gone by without at least one reference to Dragon Ball. I guess the people who make it must really, really love that series. And of course, we also got a brief shout out to Bleach in this episode. Let's see. I just cannot talk tonight. Another thing that caught my attention was it was mentioned that Ichiko lives on the 13th floor. Very, very fitting considering that misfortune is a continuing theme in this series. And just to provide a little bit of frame of reference to you, after the fight between Ronmaru and Ichiko, Momiji and Keita kind of divvy up the money. And I don't think it's made clear exactly how much Momiji got, but Keita mentions that his cut of it was that he had made 10,000 yen. Well, just to provide a little bit of perspective on that, roughly 10,000 yen is about $100. So if Momiji made something along the same lines, then those gadgets of misfortune, or whatever you want to call them, must be surprisingly affordable, because you can't even buy 2 new video games for $100. well, unless they're like one of those like freeware or micro studio things, but well, you know what I mean. You're certainly not going to be able to round up 2 brand new PlayStation 3 games for $60, or honestly, 2 brand new most PC games for $100. Just ain't happening. Then again, of course, that may have been just sort of driving the point home that in Keita's world, $100 is a small fortune, which I guess would be in keeping with what we've seen of him before. So anyway, folks, overall, I think this is a pretty good episode. It was funny. We had some good characterization moments. We got a couple of nice shout-outs to various other anime series. It was definitely, I think, a big improvement over the last 2 episodes. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to wrap it up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.